Learning the Denrian social structure had taken him quite some time. Many of the things that seemed odd at first turned out to have a great deal to do with Denrian biology. Denry had two races. The coppery people were tall and elegant. Those of a bluish tint were shorter and built more powerfully. Both races were as beautiful as any he had ever known. Although they were easily distinguishable, happily the Denry seemed to never make any distinctions. There was a ruling class, but that was by gender, not race. Women ran the planet. Females of both races reached puberty at 12 and became sexually active, but they remained infertile until about 25. During that dozen or so years, the females were encouraged to engage in sexual exploration, and although the two races intermarried freely, it seemed that the genetic makeup of only one parent passed to the children. Charles hadn't yet acquired the vocabulary that would let him ask about this fascinating oddity. Rakell, who was 16, seemed to view Charles as some sort of interesting experiment. She enjoyed the idea of having sex with an alien. Other females had expressed interest in him, but Rakell had, at least temporarily, fended them off, although she certainly did not reserve her favors for him alone. He didn't mind a world run by women. Here, only women studied formally, usually business. But none of them worked, and until they reached the age of fertility, they couldn't vote, even in the matters the Queen allowed her subjects to vote on. They certainly could not own property. It was strictly a time to learn and play. For females. When she reached fertility, a mother typically gave her daughter a small business. If the girl was motherless, an aunt or a grandmother stepped in to get her started. This was a matter of family honor, and an appropriate business was usually something small but profitable, a starter enterprise for the young woman who was now an adult. From that point on, if she wished, she could pick a husband from the available males. Charles still hadn't determined if the marriage was optional for the male. Although the population comprised far more men than women, men never voted and owned nothing. When they were young, they worked for their parents. After they turned 18, they kept their income but had to rent a place to live. When they married, everything they owned and their income belonged to their wife. Economically and socially, marriage was a step up for a male. A married man could run a business for his wife or continue working for another business, but marriage gave him entree into the social activities of a class that Charles translated loosely as, quote, the landed gentry, unquote. For the woman, having a husband had the advantage over a lover in that his income was hers to use to grow her business. Reasonably, having a husband didn't preclude having lovers. In general, the women indulged their husbands. They wanted them to be content, to be good fathers to their children. Ideally, the husband would also satisfy her sexually, but there were no particular prohibitions about taking other lovers or swapping partners. The culture views sex and marriage as quite separate things. As a result, the planet's small community thrived, and there seemed to be nothing that could be even vaguely described as domestic violence. There was no divorce, but then Charles couldn't see how anyone would benefit from a divorce. It would only mean that the woman lost the man's income, and the man had to rent a home somewhere.